They moved in on a cloudy Tuesday, carrying boxes, laughing together like they didn't have a care in the world. From the first glance, they looked perfect, him tall and self-assured, her elegant and radiant, the kind of couple people admire in silence. I was standing by my kitchen window, sipping coffee, pretending not to watch. But I watched. And I watched a lot more after that. Her name was Maya. I learned it within the first few days, during a brief encounter at the mailbox. She smiled with such warmth that it lingered with me longer than it should have. She thanked me for helping her find a local plumber, and I spent the next hour wondering if her voice sounded that soft with everyone. Her laugh drifted through the hedge that separated our houses. I heard it more often than I should admit. At first, it was harmless curiosity. I noticed when she trimmed the roses or walked out in the morning with her coffee. I timed my trash runs to match hers. Sometimes she waved. Sometimes she didn't. But when she did, my day suddenly had color. Her husband, Alex, seemed decent enough. Always courteous, often busy. I rarely saw them leave the house together after the first month. He was either at work or buried in his phone. Maya spent more time in the garden alone, humming quietly, sometimes barefoot in the grass. I found myself inventing reasons to walk outside, watering plants I didn't care about, checking the mail 3 times a day. One afternoon, she caught me off guard. "You like orchids?" she asked, pointing at the wilting pot I'd placed on my porch that morning. I admitted I didn't even know they were orchids. She laughed, then offered advice on how to save them. We stood there talking longer than we should have. She had a way of making small talk feel like something deeper. I began to crave those moments. Her presence felt like a drug, mild at first, then addicting. I started looking for her silhouette behind the curtains, listening for her footsteps on the gravel. When she wasn't around, I noticed. When she was, I lit up inside. There were no texts, no meetings, just quiet glances, subtle smiles, and the sense that something was there between us, unspoken, undefined. One evening, I saw her standing by her kitchen window, staring at nothing. Our eyes met across the distance. Neither of us looked away. It wasn't long, just a few seconds, but everything in those seconds changed. That look carried weight. Loneliness. Curiosity. Recognition. It wasn't love. Not yet. It wasn't lust. Not quite. But it was something. And that something grew louder inside me every day. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it all, that she was just being kind. But deep down I knew. You can't fake that kind of tension. You can't fabricate that subtle pull between two people who were never supposed to cross lines. And yet, lines were beginning to blur. It started with raised voices late at night. Muffled at first, then sharp. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the walls in these houses are thin. Her voice trembled with frustration. His was cold, final. They fought more often than they smiled now. The perfect image I had built around them began to crack. Days passed and she seemed different. Quieter. Her smile, when it came, didn't reach her eyes. She stayed outside longer, watering the same plants twice, walking laps around her yard like she was avoiding something inside. Once, I saw her sitting on the back step, head in her hands. The urge to cross the line and ask if she was okay felt overwhelming, but I held back. Until I didn't. It was a rainy afternoon when she knocked. Her hair damp, eyes tired. She asked if she could wait out the rain on my porch. I offered her tea, and she didn't say no. That afternoon changed everything. We didn't talk much at first, just sat there listening to the rain. Eventually, she broke the silence with a confession. "He doesn't see me anymore." Her voice was soft, almost ashamed. "I try, but it's like living with a stranger." I didn't know what to say, so I just listened. She spoke about the routine, the silence between them, the nights spent lying next to someone who felt miles away. I offered no solutions, just presence, and that seemed to be enough. After that day, she began showing up more often, always with a reason, asking for help with the hose, borrowing sugar, talking about plants, but the excuses were thin. Neither of us acknowledged the pattern. We just let it continue. Her texts started soon after. Friendly at first. A joke about the weather. A picture of her overcooked dinner. Slowly they shifted. Late-night messages. Compliments. Hints of something deeper. I should have stopped it, but I didn't want to. There was one text I read over and over. "You're the only person I feel like myself around lately." It wasn't overtly romantic, but the implication was clear. She needed more than friendship.
So did I.
One evening, we stood close in the driveway, talking about nothing important. Our hands brushed. Neither of us moved. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a second, everything stilled. The gravity between us was undeniable. It wasn't just emotional anymore. We were right on the edge, and both of us knew it. She began to confide in me regularly, details about her marriage, her regrets, the things she missed about herself. I listened, not just because I cared, but because I was falling into something I didn't know how to escape. I told myself it was still innocent, that lines hadn't been crossed. But emotional intimacy has weight, and ours was beginning to crush any boundaries we thought we had. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. It wasn't pity. It was something else, something dangerous. We were no longer just neighbors. We were something undefined, tangled in silence, and getting deeper by the day. It happened on a quiet afternoon. No planning, no words. One moment we were close, and the next there was no space left between us. Her lips met mine without hesitation, and in that instant, everything we'd been avoiding became reality. There was no turning back. The line we danced around for weeks had vanished beneath us. We began meeting whenever we could. Small windows of time when Alex was away. It was reckless, but the pull was stronger than reason. Every encounter was electric, but beneath the passion lived a growing weight. Guilt that we ignored until it started to show in our eyes. She would arrive smiling but leave looking over her shoulder. I pretended not to notice. I told myself this was temporary, that we were both just chasing something we'd lost. But it wasn't that simple. The deeper we went, the more entangled we became. She started to change. At first, more alive, laughing freely, touching my arm without hesitation. But soon after, cracks formed. She cried once, suddenly, and without warning. She said she felt torn in two. She didn't regret what we had, but she couldn't deny what it was doing to her. I didn't know how to comfort her anymore. I was part of the cause. I tried to convince myself we were just two broken people finding comfort. That maybe this was what she needed, what I needed. But every time I saw her car in my driveway, I felt a mix of thrill and dread. It was never just about desire.
It was about escape.
And escape always comes with consequences. Alex began asking questions. He noticed she was distant, distracted. He started coming home earlier. Once, she left abruptly, saying she forgot something in the oven. She hadn't. We sat in silence afterward, the air thick with the realization that we were no longer in control. I began to feel something I didn't expect, jealousy. When I saw her out with him, even just talking, it made me ache. I wanted her entirely, and that was never part of the plan. I never wanted to be the secret, but I was. We became bolder and more careless. The rush blinded us to the risk. A neighbor looked twice. A message was left unsent. Her phone lit up on my couch once, and I saw Alex's name. I handed it to her, said nothing, but the look in her eyes told me everything. This couldn't last. We were spiraling, both of us. What started as longing had turned into chaos. We didn't know how to stop, and part of us didn't want to. We were addicted to the danger, the attention, the way it felt to be wanted again. But in the background, the damage grew louder. Every kiss, every touch, felt like stealing time we didn't own. We weren't falling in love. We were falling apart, and we were dragging each other with us. It ended the way these things usually do, messy, sudden, and far too late. He found a message. Just a single line I sent when I let my guard down. "I miss you already." That was all it took. Maya didn't show up the next day or the one after. 3 days later, I saw a moving van in their driveway. She never told me goodbye. No confrontation, no explanation. Just a note slipped under my door. I wasn't looking for this. I didn't plan it. But I can't undo it either. I read it a dozen times, hoping for more. Hoping she'd say she'd stay. She didn't. Her absence hit harder than I expected. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was hollow. Everything that once felt thrilling now felt like residue, stained moments I couldn't scrub clean. I kept thinking of what we'd shared and how little it meant once reality caught up. I was just the mistake she had to leave behind. Alex never spoke to me. He didn't have to. The way he looked at my house said enough. There was shame, anger, and a kind of sadness I couldn't explain. He left too, eventually. Weeks later, their house stood empty for months. A reminder of what I'd helped destroy. I stopped waiting for her to come back. She was gone. I told myself we both got what we needed. An escape, a spark, a way to feel something again. But it wasn't worth it. The cost was too high. I lost more than her. I lost a piece of myself in the process. I used to think infidelity was simple: desire, opportunity, and bad timing. But it's not. It's slow. It creeps in through kindness, through loneliness, through attention that feels innocent until it's not. We don't fall into it by accident. We walk toward it, step by step, hoping the ground won't give way. I remember everything. Not the passion, not the moments of escape, but the silence after. The weight of choices made. The sound of nothing after the door closes for the last time. That's what stays. People will judge her. Maybe they'll judge me more. That's fair. But they weren't there in the quiet, in the spaces between what we said and what we meant. We weren't villains. We were just human, flawed, fragile, and desperate for something real in a world that had gone cold around us. If I could go back, I'd like to say I'd stop it before it started. But I don't know if that's true. Because for a while, she made me feel alive again. And when you've been numb for long enough, even a spark feels like salvation. But sparks fade. And what they leave behind is never light. Just smoke and silence and the memory of a fire that should have never been lit.